All right.
Good. Hi everybody, my name is Jahan Khamsehzadeh. Most of you guys already know me. Graduating here from JFK. Thank you guys for coming. Totally exploring a book I've been writing and a model I've been constructing using a lot of things here we've learned, right? And so why is this important, right? Like, why have we come into this? I came to the idea, the notion at 18 that like perception is so much of how our life revolves. We base all our decisions on our perception, on the context of the situation. And the most universally we call this a paradigm. And so I've been trying to, there's a new paradigm emerging in human culture. And this has been noticed very well in the last few decades. And so a lot of my life, since 18, has been trying to describe or see this emerging paradigm. For me, there's a shift at 18 where after one day, my world would change drastically. It was just like that. I woke up, new person, new eyes, and so on. And since then, it's just been like, what is it? What is happening? What is the world that we're seeing? I began to see that not only people live in a different kind of world that I've been experiencing, or a lot of us have been experiencing, most mainstream academia and so on is out of touch. And because of it, it's out of touch with reality. It doesn't reflect reality. You know? So I've been trying to get a word for this, and there's been a lot of names for the upcoming paradigm and so on. And a few weeks ago, I was at Yatra's house to come up with the word holism, and it happened spontaneously. And I wasn't one that wanted to assign a name, you know, but it just fit. And first I want to describe why the word integral doesn't fit, because I'm a huge fan of integral theory, you know, been with it for a very long time. But there's always been this intuition that it's just not going to catch on. Like, I feel like it's not, the word itself is too academic, it's too out of touch with the rest of human culture, you know, and I'll get into what the word integral itself means. But what's coming up is a holistic way of being, a holistic way of life, you know, so the word holism captures the holistic way, right? But in the word is the word whole, which shares the roots with the word heal, right? But more importantly, it has the word holy. For me, that's more important for me, is the word holy, which brings back like the sacredness to life, right? Like a lot of what we're missing is seeing reality as sacred. There's a feeling that we see a lot of us see life as meaningless. But to bring back like a holiness to experience brings meaning and depth and so on. And I think that's something that can enrich all our lives. The opposite view of holism would be the materialistic reductionistic model. It looks at the parts, right? It analyzes, it only looks at the parts, and it doesn't see the connections. And as we know about the whole is more than the sum of the parts. When the connections come together, a new entity arises, right? New properties arise, something that couldn't happen without the relationships themselves. And the building block is hold on, which we'll get into later, which again fits with the word. And I thought, in the book I'm calling it's called Web of Being, the re-evolution of life, right? You break up that apart, the re-evolution, to re-evolve, to take what came before and redirect the course of evolution, consciously this time. You know, we're at a point right now where awareness is becoming aware that awareness evolved. That's a milestone in awareness, you know. At one point, awareness became aware of itself. Huge link in evolution, right? From cosmological evolution, awareness became aware of itself as human beings, catapulted us, accelerated, right? And as this acceleration is taking place, awareness is still looking. And at some point, it's like, yo, I'm changing, I'm evolving. Once that realization comes in, it can actually control its own evolution and accelerate it at a pace it never could before. And that's where we find ourselves right now in human culture, which I believe this is going to be needed for us to save ourselves. This is all connected, right? To create a more sustainable planet. So like continue the life of awareness, to continue like human culture as we know it, we're going to have to take our own evolution, rip it, and consciously direct it. And since this is the type of power, what it comes with is a type of responsibility. Responsibility for our own growth, responsibility for the planet, responsibility for each other and our own actions. So I just already explained why context is so important, right? And at the base of this, we start seeing like the different kinds of paradigms come into play. This is just our paradigm. At one point, we realize paradigms evolve, and so this is just a lens. We're switching lenses, but at one point, we realize that's all that's really switching, you know. And model will never actually describe reality itself. So I've been looking at this model for a decade now, and I loved it. But in the last couple of years, I started to see it as a little inaccurate, and that's no fault to say Wilbur. I'm a huge fan. I love Wilbur a lot, right? I started playing a lot with the words inner and outer, and started to see how it does not describe my experience, right? So what I'm seeing right now, we tend to have our experience say insides and outsides, right? But is that really the case? You know, if I go, it's like, where's my inside? Like, it's not, like these are materialistic words we're using to describe another domain. We're using this part to describe this part out here, right? There's no inside and outside. Somebody once, it snapped for me, like I got the clear realization when somebody's like, oh, I gotta explore my inner space. And for a long time I've been realizing everyone's like, go inside. I'm like, how do you do that? Like, how do you go inside? Right? I'm like, am I dumb? Am I not realizing what people are talking about? It took me a long time to realize the language is ridiculous. It's crazy. It's not real. It doesn't reflect reality. You can't go inside. There's no inside, right? There's an experience taking place, right? An experience itself is another domain. We have the material and physical, right? And then we have another domain on top of it, parallel to it, called experience. But we tend to collapse one domain in terms of the other, so we believe only the physical exists. And from this point of view, we see from the eye, so we must assume that we're back here and so on, but that's not really what's taking place. A lot of us know. So just to get how Wilbur got into this model and the importance of it. In the late 80s, his wife died, you guys might know Treya, and he wrote a beautiful book called Grace and Grit, and he became a hermit for 3 years. And during this time, he had thousands of the world's models, 2,000 or 3,000, and laid them all on legal pads, trying to make sense of how they fit together. And after months of trying to put all together the world's knowledge, one night he was playing a game, a philosophical game, saying, what does it take to make a universe? He says, well, you need an internal and external. You need some kind of experience, some kind of being experiencing the universe, and then you need a physical part, so space, time, and matter. It seems fundamental, right? And this has been going on for thousands of years, the philosophical and mystical circles, subject and object. He's like, but that's not enough. Like, that universe would suck, right? You need more than one being. Life would be boring. You need somebody to relate with, somebody to talk to. It's like, okay, so put a relationship with beings, right? And so he's extended this part, the I and the it, right? Pulled it down and made it collective. So this gives us the 4 domains, the quadrants of there. It's upper singular. Now we have the internal, but also collective, like a shared internal space, which I believe as a human culture, this is the part that we're missing right now that we need to emphasize some more. There's a lot of the spirituality. Up here, the sciences, like the physical, the singular, physical. And as we get down here, we have the collective, external, which is systems theory, and ecology, and so on. So again, I've been playing with this for a long time, and in the last year, I saw the importance of relationship. And there's relationship intersubjectively and systemically. And this is what this should be focused on. See, like, it started hitting me more and more as I heard Wilbur talk about how he got to the 1 quadrants. And I think what he was trying to get to and what he didn't emphasize on was not only that one being and another being needs to exist, it's like that being itself from a singular position needs to have a relationship. Not a collective, a relationship, right? Everything that comes into existence has these components. They have relationship, and then that experience and physical manifestation. So that's what I came to like. So that's why I created this model of experiential physical relationship. So everything that exists has these 3 things. By bringing focus to relationship, we start to care about each individual person and each individual interaction takes place. The breakthrough came when I started to realize that community, because this is a community domain, right? A collective domain. The building blocks of a community are the individual interactions. So we have a misperception that there's a whole. There's a coalescing that takes place that I'll talk about, right? But it's actually a whole bunch of little interactions that take place that come together, self-organize, and create a whole. A couple of days ago, I was thinking about this again. So say we have drops of water, right? We see a puddle on the ground. So we drop here, drop here, drop here, drop here, the singulars, right? Inside those molecules. We put the drops together and create a puddle. Those are still individual drops, right? They're still individual molecules, creating individual interactions, and there's a coalescing that takes place. So now they look like one entity. You see something that looks like one thing. So that's what happens with human culture, communities, and so on. There's a coalescing that comes together. And this is the part that gets left out, is the intersubjectivity, right? So not only do we have an internal experience taking place in the physical body, and systemically, systems theory would say that we create systems, we create families and mechanistic systems, that we create communities and so on, but there's a shared experiential domain taking place. And I would like to create a visual of what this is, right? So here's why. So there's a subject object, and this is the traditional way of looking at it, right? But if we look at universally how this all begins, right? Was there a whole bunch of little subjects that springed up, and this seems the only way sense to make sure of the cosmos. that there's one subject, and this one subject has a whole bunch of manifestations that's infinitum, right? And I'll call it God, and I'll call it spirit, whatever, but there's one consciousness, one awareness that flows, right? And so as we go closer and closer to the source by disidentifying the other subjects, we come closer to the source domain. So over here, this is the intersubjective domain. This is a shared space that we'll have with all of existence. So, to create why this is important, I'll get into synchronicity. So we have these four domains. And so how does this apply to our life, right? My experiences with synchronicity started at 18. And things kept happening in my reality that I couldn't make sense of. There are things just, I think of things and they disappear. It was just too weird. I started looking at all these patterns in my experience and they would look up in the physical world. Happened almost every day, multiple times over and over and over and over, but there's something crazy going on. Like, I'm not insane, like there's something, reality isn't what I think it is. And it's just kept unfolding for many years. It's just like, okay, this is real, and it still hits me. I'm like, it still hits me all the time. This is real. Like this is reality. Why can't we make sense of it? Because we think reality is just this component here, and we think like all of this other stuff. So around 23, to get to this scenarios of like some big personal experiences of how this began to hit. I was high at a party one time. I was 23 years old, sitting on a couch, and I heard this internal voice asking me, what's my age? How old are you? Part of me was kind of stunned, like, do I answer this? This is kind of weird, you know? But I decided to. I said, I'm 23. And a few seconds later, somebody walked up to a digital radio and turned it to 23, put the volume at 23. Within seconds, and it's an immediate knowing, like, that just happened. It's reality smacking you. There's something going on, like you're being taught there's something going on. Experiences like this makes me realize that you're working with an intelligence at all times. That everything in this room, every particle, every molecule is exactly where it's supposed to be. It's designed, right? So if we look at everything as parts and wholes, the concept of a whole-on, right? Everything is a part and of a whole at the same time. At the most universal level, it's still a whole. It has an intersubjectivity that all fits with, right? And intelligence, it structures it. So these arise at the same time. So a change in one brings a change in the other. For example, if we have a change in, like spirits, there's going to be a change up here in our brain composition of molecules and so on, right? The changes in our body system, changes that take place. So what I'm trying to get to is reality is one motion. You know, the inside and the outside, they change because they're one in the same. They're different aspects, but they're one in the same. So I've had a lot of experiences like with like precognitive dreams and so on, because we have a shared space with all of matter, like all of it. You know, so it makes sense like that I'd have a feeling, like just walk out in the hallway and I'll see somebody I know. You know, a couple of days ago, it's like you never learn because I've been conditioned from this materialistic standpoint. So 4 or 5 days ago, I emailed a friend. I haven't seen it in months. You know, they replied back. It's cool, right? 2 days ago, and 2 days later, I wake up and have this image of Chinese food. Okay, like it's my mind. But I'm like, so I asked my friend, like, you want to go get lunch? You know? And so he's like, sure. You know, so we go out. Me and my roommate go out, and I couldn't pick Thai or whatever. Out of all the restaurants we go to, you know, we decided to go to College Avenue, go get some Chinese. So we eat our food, and as soon as I walk out, there's that friend I emailed. Chances of that happening, you know, I don't believe in randomness. It's almost impossible, right? All the people in London that this person decides to be out, to be on that street, but then this happens all the time, like all the time, you know? So you're trying to say this is all enmeshed and interlinked, and this is natural, it's normal flow of the cosmos. We start to see this from the evolution of, say, atoms, molecules, and cells. Like, why did those come together, right? Why did life evolve? There's an intersubjective link that comes to atoms to create molecules. An intersubjective psychic link, since you already have consciousness, that comes together and creates cells, brings life. And as we develop more complexity, there's more depth and there's more experience, there's more consciousness. So as we go down to the building blocks, right? So that's a lot. The building blocks is this idea of whole-ons, that there's only wholes and parts in reality. Everything's a whole and a part of something else. Well, there's systems within systems within systems, and each part of them has an experiential component, a physical component, and a relational component that come together and coalesce. There's a self-organizing that takes place. What I've come to see is that when there's more consciousness, more complexity, there's more organization, right? So if we have more presence, more intensity in a situation, in meditation, or a lot of our psychedelics help, there's more synchronicity that takes place. The universe naturally organizes. There's a sense of coherence. It naturally wants to be organized and evolve. It's higher complexity, more and more personalized, and matter itself. So that's kind of the building blocks, 40 pages long, but it goes into great detail about how the mechanics of how this works. I'll lose you if I went through it all. The fall of materialism just kind of says like why, when we have this kind of model, like just a materialistic model, why our society doesn't work. And so we fail to acknowledge relationship, we fail to acknowledge experience. The model, like right now, so many people are upset, only care about themselves, and so on. Like our economy is going to fall apart. A model needs to change where we're bringing all the dimensions of reality itself. The perennial philosophy means that there's a mystical core set of beliefs that keep coming up cross-culturally. That's because we share that intersubjective domain. There's things that are true, that like love is primate, like it's real, right? They go as far as say like matter is an illusion. I'll say the matter and consciousness both coexist. Materialistics normally only pay attention to one part of the model. Perennial is mostly this domain up here, right? But they're all parts of reality that need to be acknowledged. And there's a lot of direction that can come. There's an evolutionary growth to mankind. This part right here creates a new spiritually evolving universe. It's a new cosmology, right? So what we need is a new context for our lives. Starts from the Big Bang and gives us a model using synchronicity and all the different parts of the domains and recreates like the whole model. I studied physics for 3 years and we went over models of the Big Bang all the way till now, but it's purely physical. And you're leaving out why am I here, who am I, all this stuff that is very important to us. We left ourselves out of the picture. So it creates both consciousness and awareness evolving with matter itself. The developing psycho-spiritual human. Now it's like we have the macrocosm look, and we go inside now and we focus on the individual being developing. Because evolution just hasn't stopped. It's still accelerating with us. We're not at the end. It never ends. And we've explored, dozens of models of growth. And there's a certain evolutionary growth in one direction. Towards complexity, towards growth, towards betterment, And so there's a certain landmarks that take place in all the models. There's a certain direction that all the models go through. Implications of the model. So if we believe this, how does it change our life? We would live very differently. We would care about each other, ourselves, other beings. I'll talk about a topic that's dear to me. It's like, say we buy this, right? Which, for me, experientially, is very true, and not for many of you. Something that's dear to me is being vegan. It's very dear to me, and it makes complete sense to have integrity with this model, right? So all awareness, all life, everything in the universe has these components. Right? But so do animals, and I think that's very neglected because we kind of come from this materialistic standpoint. Animals feel, that's real. They have a consciousness, they have an awareness, they have an experience that needs to be acknowledged. We share an intersubjective domain with them. Our psyche, we share a psyche with them. That's true. When we inflict pain on them, we're hurting ourselves. If we believe we are one mind, we need to act like that. When we hurt other animals, we hurt ourselves. We break our own integrity. We want to be living with love. If we really want to embody a model, you need to live like it. You need to have to feel for that animal, care for it. And it just acknowledges existence that it experiences. Systemically, it's awful to be vegan. To not be vegan. It hurts. Okay, ecologically, it's awful. Systemically, financially, it's not a good deal. In the upper right quadrant, vegetarians live 10 years longer than non-vegetarians. They are 50% less likely to die of heart attacks. The number one cause of death in the United States. It's just in every way, shape, or form, it just makes sense to move in that direction. And I want to push people in that direction. Just out of love, because it matters. It does. So there's a lot of implications that haven't been seen from these models. And the vision, the last one, is just a vision of the future. We need a direction to walk towards, to move towards. I do believe heaven on earth is inevitable. It's not a heaven that religion has been saying, but this is that. And we can create the conditions to make it right. I believe it's inevitable. Evolution leads in that direction, and I'm not going to see it in my lifetime, but we're moving in that direction. I do believe the world will live in this kind of way in the future. It's the only sustainable way. One of the questions I started asking before doing all this is, what does it take to make a sustainable planet? What will it take for us to continue life on Earth. We need to radically reorient ourselves, changing our values and our perceptions to become more accurate. I believe the more we live closer to the truth of reality, the more we can move with it. Like there's going to be an integrity to the whole thing, and then we can create a sustainable planet. And I think all these things are going to be able to come to play. It needs to come to sense of fruition. So I'd like to end with a poem that kind of wraps it together. Okay. The Big Bang sang. Okay, hold on, it's going. The Big Bang sang. At the Big Bang sang, I felt a dream that seemed an explosion to bring existence to everything. It was me, you see, the singularity, full manifesting energy, appearing captivity. Particles holding me down, but never really balanced to wear the crown because I'm the universe sound. Everything sings my song. I'm the all, tall, and small, from the atom to the greatest cataclysm. Given shape, rock or ape, I mutate alchemically, transforming endlessly into all possibilities. Orchestrating synchronistically, holistically, intertwined through causality, whether it be really or mass, my power you grasp. I gave birth to the earth, the word of my verse, matter from a star that traveled afar. Billions of years have passed, relatively a flash, humanity came to grasp, but it did not last. My greatest art project yet, dynamic, the spiral, self-aware to get from the evolution of the extravagant blue planet, they can understand that I had planned it. It is I that makes you move. It is I your cells respond to. It is me that comes down from the sun. It is me you've been feeling alone. I created all so you can see me. What is your true identity? Do you believe that you're separate from me? That is not possible. I'm each particle, unstoppable. As the Tao just flow around that ghost cyclical identity is burned at each turn. Purified at the beginning of each life. The ego arises in one of my many disguises. Collectively, you've been visionary, showing glimpses of what is me through your mythologies. Examples of my flexibility, creatively flowing endlessly through all humanity. Through patterns that capture your attention. Click you pay attention to signs I find, placed purposefully by my mind. Signs or religions come to the same conclusion. It is I then the solution. To inspire, to climb higher, to light the fire, to be the flame that cannot be tamed. Your source of passion, past upon irrational. The one that turns your soul from lead to gold. They'll speak of something brighter than the sun. They speak of the none, the one that grew into the two, many things you grew into. Varieties and complexities, flavors to taste to measure, me soulfully, and you rotate it. Do not be mistaken, though, for you to awaken. Paradigm shifts, rifts, sifts of sand, earthquakes on land, but still I stand. Human, but a new man in new land, understand. New eyes, new lives, because it shifts inside. Many people realizing, alas, man manifesting critical mass. Soon the moment comes to pass, the moment we take off our masks. And we will enjoy it as explore myself subjectively. For objective reality, subjective components of me, the accumulations of me, yous, and we's. All that exists is my mind intertwined, connecting matter endlessly, networking all you see. And soon the time will come when the earth is devoured by the sun. We'll find a new place to play, surfacing galaxies for surface to birth, a new earth fall or away. And it is born and given form imaginatively. One day my external qualities will cease to be. Then you, me, and galaxies. I'll become an undivided whole, an embryo, potentiality yet to be born. The polar opposites unite. The tension between them no longer given light. The yin and yang had sang, the dividing line begins to disappear, but I'm not held in fear. With ease I cease to be. The yin of the eternal play I play so endlessly. And as the universe erodes and the curtains fold, I remember the stories told. The stories lived, each one I was in. From the beginning, cannot wait to begin again. It's coming around again, the end. Turn back to the beginning again. We'll make it to the altitude. We'll make it spin a cyclical journey that never ends. Thank you.
Whoa. And that is Consciousness and Transformative Studies. Do you have this written down anywhere? Seriously, I would love to have a copy. All of us, I think.
I would like to have a copy of your performance of it, actually. I thought it was amazing.
Well, that could happen.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you,
YouTube. Thank you.
I thank the YouTube.
That's it. I mean, that's amazing. Really, seriously, you could post that.
All right.
You might go viral. Who knows?
Bring up the
That's
awareness.
incredible.
You felt it all. Every single thing you were teaching was present in that home. Felt the energy, felt the passion, felt the Big Bang, felt the possibilities of new universes when the Earth gets and the sun are gone.
Yeah, it's just
It's awesome.
the way reality hits. I mean, I was never planning to say this poem. I wrote it a couple years ago.
You were planning to do that today?
No, not at all. I took a shower this morning. I was going through the presentation, and I'm like, oh, and it started saying the poem. Like in the shower this morning, and I'm like, dude, like it fits, like badass. So I went over and started practicing today in another room, and I was like, dude, this is great. So
We should put it at the beginning of the book. Here's the short version.
right,
Here's the long version. Abstract.
Rusty. I mean, I haven't practiced that in like a year or two. So it's
That's amazing.
That's
That's
usually
incredible.
awesome.
That's incredible. I mean, truly, and the performance to go with it.
Thank you.
Including the.
And we
me about music.
No music. So I have a difficult question for you.
Yes.
The other day, someone sent me an article, an online article, that there was a group of, I think, 18 scientists, paleontologists, ecologists, biologists, chemists, geologists, climatologists, who got together, reviewed all the data, and they concluded that a major collapse is going to happen not in a few centuries, but in a few generations. That means people on the earth now, right? So, and in response to this, I went to this website on mass extinctions. And I want you to go to that website and read it, because part of what is very interesting, this theory of that there's been 5 major extinctions, and they different criteria depending on what's major. There have been many minor extinctions, and the definition of a mass extinction is when over 50% of the species die in a geologically short time period. And they have lists of causes, global warming, global cooling, the ocean, the saline surface of the ocean overturns, and what's at the bottom comes up, and it basically disrupts marine life. They call it basalt flooding, which is actually a term for I finally realized for volcanoes, when there's a bunch of volcanoes simultaneously, they put all this dust in the air, and it disrupts photosynthesis. The meteorites, obviously that's probably what the dinosaurs went down. And one of the theories is that there were no mass extinctions before 540 million years ago, because there was not sufficient complexity for an extinct. The extinctions only happen when there's a certain level of complexity of species build up. There's this food chain and a kind of hierarchy of being, if you want to call it, and that's when the extinctions happen. So you're much more vulnerable for extinction when you have greater complexity. And it is not a straight line of going from no complexity to greater complexity. It's complexity and then a disruption, and then a growth back into complexity, and then a disruption. The mammals took over when the dinosaurs went down. So I want you to look at that website and see if it integrates with your theory. And also just to hear your comments.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's important. So the chapter 2, which of materialism which you're going to read, starts off with the idea of the phoenix, the metaphor, that everything goes with death and rebirth. The phoenix has to die for a new one to come in. And the death and rebirth runs through all of man. It's an archetype that goes through everything, and including evolution. That we tend to change when we have to. Right? Unfortunately, that's the majority of human beings. We move out of pain. We evolve when we grow out of pain. So if a person has a behavioral pattern that isn't suiting it, it's normally comfortable and it won't change unless there's a significant amount of pain that takes place. A scenario that comes to my mind is the idea, I've seen the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, the one with Keanu Reeves. And in the movie, he comes to decide whether mankind should live or not, because they've done a lot of destruction, like on the Earth. And during this, towards the end of the movie, there's the climax when he realizes, hey, they're going to change. There's a chance they're going to change when they have to. Once they're jeopardizing their own survival, their own existence, then they're going to do whatever it's going to take for them to survive. 18 out of 18, I was so naive that I thought it was just going to happen like overnight. Like I really thought that. Every day I drove to school, I'm like, it's going to happen tomorrow. We're all going to change. And then I saw these wars taking place, throughout the next decade. Went to Afghanistan, I thought that was ridiculous. Went to Iraq, I went and protested all these, and there weren't that many people out there. I'm like, dude, I'm not on the same page as everyone else. In my head, I thought the whole world was like this. So unfortunately, it's going to take spiral dynamics, which will move through a lot of different levels of development. And move from egocentric to ethnocentric, to world-centric to cosmocentric. Majority of the world is in the egocentric, moving to ethnocentric. And so like we're talking about, seeing the world as a whole, to start caring about it, is a world-centric stance. It's a very mature stance a lot of human beings have moved into. But we evolve when we need to. Once we're realizing that your ethno type of group, your kind of racial group or nation group is going to suffer, and mine's going to suffer regardless, that we need to band together, then we can eventually start moving into a world-centric stance. So we can see this time, as awful as it is a time that we can push the envelope and evolve. It sucks to admit that there's going to be a lot of pain. It just is. And I did a lot of stuff with the Occupy movement. I was going out there a lot. And there was one night where around 12 o'clock, everyone's trashing the buildings and just lighting fires. And you're like, what's happening? I've been out there for like 10 hours and it's peaceful, and these nighttime people come out and breaking down windows. I'm like, you're gonna kill the movement, what's going on? And I was distraught. I was with my friend. In the midst of this, some girl I didn't know comes up, grabs my hand. She's like, this needs to happen. I was like, it saved me. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, there needs to be destruction. She's like, you're here to build the next world, but this world needs to fall apart. And I saw that kind of energy in me when I was rebellious during my teenage years, where I thought I was all about the end of the world and we need to change the system and so on. But this is to start concentrating on the world that comes after. Like this is for the world that's going to take place. Unfortunately, people are so locked into our system, the economical, the capitalism, materialistic mindset that creates the whole thing. It comes from materialism, that they're too comfortable, they're too invested in the current way of life, that it's not going to cause a change unless it rattles and they suffer. And unfortunately, it's going to be through pain, and that's an awful thing to hear. But I don't think there's another way.
So in addition to the evolution aspect, there's the co-creation aspect of it, right? And so there is the concept that the evolution is happening, and enough of us, all of us in this room at JFK and the whole consciousness world movement, that we actually have the ability to contribute the co-creation. We can.
We're going to do the best we can. As seeing ourselves as individuals, we can see ourselves as one unit. As hold-ons within hold-ons within hold-ons. We're all individual hold-ons coming together to an earth family, right? It's other hold-ons. There's 4 drives to hold-ons. The autonomy, the agency, that's one, right? We have communion, we have self-transcendence, and self-dissolution. It's self-destruction. A hold-on comes to self-destruction when it doesn't fit the other capacities, when it doesn't take care of its other capacities. It doesn't take care of its own autonomy, its own integrity. It doesn't have communion, and it doesn't self-transcend. If we don't push the way of evolution, we're going to dissolve, and that's currently what's happening. But a lot of us here at the school and a lot of places, we're at the peak. We're pushing the transcendence to try not to take place. That's how all life has been. It says we evolve or die. Like a lot of things evolve because they have to. A giraffe grows along their neck because it has to. We evolve because a lot of times we have to. That's sort of fun.
So where's the consciousness part of it from? Were you saying that way, either evolve or die? Because I have the consistent experiences like you have with the number 3. All the time. I think it's constantly happening everywhere, and it's just how weak we are to seeing it, right? All the time. Yeah. So, wow, I just lost that thought. It was a really, I just lost that thought.
Okay. You want to know where co-creation is in his model? Is that what you're getting at, Amy?
Well, thank you. Where is the universal? Where is the actual consciousness part? It's not like it's you or me that we're evolving and the co-creating, because it's the universe partnering with us in the whole thing.
Yeah. And then not to see us even separate. We are the universe, even with all the choices we make and so on.
Right. So doesn't that support you in relaxing a little?
It does, in the sense, like looking in cosmological time, that, like I said, I think heaven's inevitable. Like, is in a utopia, right, for me is inevitable. Like, it's going to happen on Earth. It's inevitable. Right. It might not happen in my lifetime. Did the Great Depression happen? Did the Holocaust happen? They haven't. It sucks, And again, I'm going through a lot more personal pains in my life. So everything I've gone through, I can't change that. It's real, But I believe the end goal, I think we're shooting at is inevitable. We're going to learn. We learn from mistakes. There's things called feedback loops and systems. And you learn, and you change and you evolve. But we're going through a lot of cycles, and we're learning from them. And hopefully, we're not going to repeat. I think we will repeat a lot of the same mistakes we've made in the past.
So, are you thinking about calling your book "Heaven is Inevitable"?
That's the vision part. That's the direction part. Oh. That's the utopia. I call it web of being because we need to bring back like beingness, like experience, the importance. And the web part has the relationship part. And we already know we all are physical, and the re-evolution to just now to take the current form of evolution and move it in a direction that we choose. That's part of the magic of life. We have free will, we have choice, and that's a responsibility. Like you need. That's the hard part to admit is that you need to make a choice. It doesn't all happen by itself. We choose. It's a gift and it's a responsibility that we need to use.
I think the hard question is whether we've already put things in motion in terms of climate change and other things that we have time to make the choice to reverse or
I've been watching End of the World scenario documentaries from last week. It's just something I love. Like same thing. Have we? I think we still have a lot of possibilities. There's also, as much as I've seen all the End of the World stuff, there's enough technology and knowledge out there to make a change. There's so many types of alternative fuels. There's so many that we can implement tomorrow. Whether we have the knowledge is not important. It's whether we decide to implement them, like whether society accepts those values and do them. You know, and it sucks to see that it's like things are probably still, as much as there's parts of humanity that's climbing, if we're looking at the mainstream, there's still things that are falling apart. But people are learning. You know, natural evolution moves in a direction. It moves towards growth and learning.
Jahan, I want to talk about your models. And you said that you were uncomfortable, or that you found ultimately the integral model lacking in some ways, and you have proposed your own model. So it's a multi-part question. So what is it that you have found lacking in the integral model? And in your own model, how does that model relate to the more traditional definition of holism as mind, body, spirit? Can you
I like that. That's very well. I'm going to start with the last part in it and go else, like, because it fits well with mind, body, spirit, right? Mind, experiential. You can say body, physical, right? And spirit is and it's connectivity. It's the whole thing, you know. So that those work. And as far as what you said earlier about integral is, for me, it's important to claim that I love integral. Like I do, I love it a lot. So I would never say I'm dissatisfied or I'm happy or discontent with the model whatsoever. It's a sense of some physics for a long time. It's like the Newtonian came with Newtonian physics, right? And that was a physical model of the world, and it works when we look at macro objects, and on a surface level it works, right? But the greater mechanisms of matter came later with like electromagnetism and thermodynamics and eventually quantum mechanics. We can still use classical physics to make sense of our world, but it's not really why things happen. So there's the surface, there's a symptom of it, and so we can still use the integral model for everything, you know. But I'm talking about like why it takes place, and for me, I was looking for clarification of why things really happen. They happen because of relationship. When we put collective, and I've been struggling with collective individual for a long time. Like I love that dynamism, but the idea of the collective versus the individual, which I found like a lot of Ayn Rand philosophy, dissolves when we focus on relationship. There's no more a polarity between individual and collective, you know. So it goes away. So it's like what this is a relational realm. That's why I decided to call it that. We need to focus on relationship. Stop trying to fix the relationships here. You know, I'm gonna fix my community. No, fix your individual interactions. That's what it's making it. You know, everyone's trying to fix the whole, which so do I. You know, but it's like, and that's good. That's a way to go with it because that's a component also. But you need to start with the actual interactions. Make quality interactions. You have a quality whole.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and so again, so I wanted words that he used, that words up there that went to the internal, external, that actually fit reality. Like I said, because those don't fit our experience. So I just wanted to clarify the model. That is to bring more clarity, more things that are more true. Like I'm looking for accuracy, you know. And so I would never disrespect Robert at all.
What I think you're making an important point. An important point is that, in essence, it's a model that separates. I mean, to look perhaps more closely, but it does not necessarily fit our experience, because our experience is a whole experience that is indeed the sum of parts, but not experienced as separate.
Yeah, and I mean, for everything I'm saying, I totally believe that Wilbur himself as a person would know. But the model, I think it's important when you make a model for the public. Well, it might be misleading for a lot of people, even though I believe he understands that there's no insides and outsides. He gets that, but he still uses those words, and that's going to confuse a lot of people. And so again, why I chose these words is because when I lead to the base of it, we're having an experience. How do I know I exist? You know, like apart from the Descartes, I think of where I am. I know I exist because I'm having an experience. I wanted to get to the most fundamental roots of what's happening. So I put experience. I put physical. What we do know is out here. What's the most primordial, fundamental thing? You know, there's something physical. You know, there's something physical. You know, even when we say all this broken down, the molecules, and there's space between them and atoms, space between them. There's an energy. There's a physical energy, right? I can't deny it. It's just here. You know. And then the relational part is the new part that comes in. And even when it comes to like a lot of the spiritual teachings and stuff, I see that lacking. Like they don't emphasize relationship. They emphasize these two a lot. You know, subject and object, experience and matter, and the falling away of it, and all that, you know, the Maya. But it's like there's a relational component, and there's an intersubjective relational component, but we all share the same psyche at a greater degree. And matter itself was once one energy, and it still reduces. There's still an entanglement to all of matter, you know. But it all came from a non-solid energy, and it started forming into atoms and molecules themselves. I started playing with the connectivity with it the last few days. So, like in terms of like the psyche and all of it, you know, Freud had the model of like the iceberg, right? Like, you know, like so like the conscious part is only the tip of the iceberg, right? Then you have lower than that, it's like the subconscious, but it's all underwater. But if you take that model further, you know, say continents and mountains, and you say, oh, we're only the tip. If you take it further, it all connects. Like the Earth is one phenomenon. So it's like you see it separated because of the water. That's a misperception. That we see us as disconnected. You see all the continents and the mountains as disconnected. That's a misperception. As you go deeper and deeper to the roots, we all share the very same core. We all stem, we come to the same land. And so does our psyche and matter.
So could those three terms, could you use interchangeably with experiential, physical, and relationship, subjectivity, objectivity, and intersubjectivity?
Yeah, so that's why I started breaking up with the word subject and object. It's for me to also, I don't want to forget that Wilbur does collapse things into a big three, where he starts emphasizing what's called subjective, the way he says subject, object, and intersubjectivity. But there's also an objective relational aspect. There's things connect systematically, like a cell, they connect in a systemic way physically too, not just intersubjectivity. You know, so that's a part. He starts breaking down, collapsing these into one, and this into one. What I did is collapse relationship, and then these over here. So it changes things because relationship exists in both forms.
I mean, it's sort of arbitrary where you define the boundary of something, right?
Well, they're all, like, one doesn't exist by itself. They're all very interdependent, interwoven. So you're going to find, the deeper you go into one, you find another. And to talk about what you said, subject and object, and I said the other day in classes, you go deeper and deeper into subject, you start seeing objects. You normally would say physical object, experience, subject. But you can see your experience, the thoughts and feelings as objects. And so that starts to blur the line. And as you go into your dreams, you start seeing objects. There's a physical world, like a subtle physical world in your dreams. You can touch things in your dream. It's like, oh, this is real, like I'm experiencing this, but I'm still having experiencing in my dream, and there's relationships throughout your dream. So these things go all through every realm. So if you go far into one, you start seeing the other. You go into matter, you start seeing subjects and relationships. Matter itself has a type of consciousness, all of it. You know, so it's like, it's interpenetrating. When you go into one, you start to see the other ones manifest.
So, I'm sorry to hog all the space with all the questions. Does anybody else want to ask a question before I do ask another question? So, I'm interested in, yep.
Oh, you're just scared.
Oh,
That's like at an auction. You have to be careful about fixing your hair.
Karen, you
Okay, so
you just bought a
I'm interested
$75,000
in,
painting.
I think I was just yawning.
I'm interested in, dream consciousness, as you know, and if you really pay attention to it, you notice that consciousness has the ability to identify with different things, right? Different parts of the self, different parts of the universe, and that it's very fluid, at least in the dream states. So, also, I think it's, the idea of inner and outer, we've had this conversation several times about the subtle body. I think, like Jung talked about the subtle body as a psychic localization. So in our language, you're talking about the issue of identification. What is consciousness identified with? Is it identified with the head, which I find, frankly, Wilbur to be in his head and maybe not in his body? And then what happens when consciousness is identified with one of the chakras or several of the chakras or all the chakras in a Kundalini experience? That's very different than the person who is skin, what Rolf called the skin encapsulated ego, where you're identified sort of with the surface of yourself, which is really, to use an example, I think anorexic women are very identified with their appearance and kind of a surface identification. So I'm just wondering how this thing of the fluidity of what we identify with plays with your model.
Thank you. That's well done and read about it. on a more meta way, like we're saying that anything that doesn't change in awareness is in there for too long, we identify with. So say we use an example, so you're talking about the psychological component, but to make this more obvious, say physically, there's a ball here, and it followed me everywhere, but more with the ball here, even though it's not connected to me, follow me everywhere I go through. I'm gonna identify with this ball and say it's a part of me, right? Which is true. If I'm at a certain stage of development and I'm always in the stage and it's not changing, I'm gonna identify with it. My body's always here, I'm identifying. So anything that's in consciousness or in awareness for too long, we identify with. That's why things have to change. Like things need a flow. Like the physical world is constant. Everything in the physical world is in motion. You know, we appear standing still right now, but the Earth is spinning, you know, around the sun spins around everything, galaxies, everything in the physical world is always in motion. Things in our conscious awareness, we don't identify with feeling because they're fluid. If a feeling was there for, say, 4 or 5 years, we're going to identify with a feeling, things as part of ourselves. You know, so things have to move along in our awareness to say, hey, I mean, eventually say, all I am is just looking and awareness, right? But like at that point, it's anything in front of you for too long, any behavior, anything, we start to identify it and say, oh, that's us.
Yeah, that's true. Stuckness. You're basically saying identification is a kind of stuckness of consciousness attached to something.
And then the death is, that's what we fear. We're stuck on an idea, an image of ourselves and so on.
So, but I mean, it also plays with what you're saying about having a consciousness that's identified with a world-centered consciousness. I think you use the term.
World-centric.
World-centric consciousness. So, you know, Hillman uses this expression, the psyche the size of the earth. I think it's Hillman. You know, if our identification was with the earth, if every one of us was identified with the earth, we would be, you know, we couldn't behave the way we are.
That's interesting you should say that. I've been thinking, as this whole conversation has been going on, that indigenous people actually start with relationships. They don't start with the individual, they start with relationships. And the relationships are these multi-centric relationships of relationship with the earth, relationship with the other beings, in equality that live on the earth. And that everything stems from relationship and from the energetic connections. And you can see that if you have that kind of mentality, destruction doesn't, you know, it's much more difficult to destroy something that you have a relationship with.
And I'm sorry.
No,
You know what? I would really want to support you on doing the TED lectures, man. Just take each one of the chapters, just like film them, have them do it. Can you see Johan at the? Oh my God, I'm feeling so inspired. That was so great. Thank you so much.
all right, so since we've been hogging things.
I mean, I wouldn't mind responding if that's.
Yeah, no, I'm just wanting to open it up to people who haven't.
I would like to respond to what you said. And it's important because we tend to, and this is with most respect to what's it called, to dream, to romance a lot of things from the past or different cultures. So Wilbur would say tribal mentality is a purple, right? And it's I think something we're missing a purple, like in the stages of development.
Yeah, he would say that.
Yeah, right. So that's
and I would disagree.
And that's not, and I'm not saying that they don't evolve. And I think it's like we are disconnected since. You know, so we're disconnected with a lot of parts of ourselves. Now we need to bring more of a global tribe. Like I'm all for, like let's globally dance and have a tribe. Like we're missing that component. The fall parts of say like an all global, that the traditional tribal views is tribes still fight with each other.
Right.
You know, and so they identify with the whole, but they don't even have a sense of self yet. So a lot of them, it's like I'm so identified with the group that I haven't even individuated. You know, and that's important. You need to individuate fully to come and connect with the rest of the cosmos. And I don't know if I know you've done a lot of work with modern cultures, and so your knowing in this area is much more vast. And I'm coming from this type of model.
I really have to. Can I speak to that?
Please do.
Could we stay another couple of hours and just like everybody keep talking about everything?
Right.
This is like so great.
This is really interesting because what modern cultures often do, Western cultures, is they want to speak for the indigenous. And indigeneity becomes one thing, it becomes a monolith. And it's often identified with something that happens in 18th century, you know, the cowboys and Indians and how they were and how it all was, and it was all romanticized. But actually, modern cultures, modern indigenous cultures have evolved just like everyone else has. And so their understanding of relationship is also evolved. And quite frankly, most of them are pretty nonviolent. I mean, they value diversity. That's one of the things that can actually help them survive, to see difference as not bad but good. So, you know, and I'm only can speak for the culture that I've just been hanging out with, but they themselves point that out as a commonality among different modern cultures. So, you know, yeah, we used to fight, the pioneers fought with the Indians too, you know, I mean, but, well, actually, we're still doing it, but anyway, there is, I think,
I want to speak to that. So we can talk about tribal cultures 100,000 years ago, which would be much more different when that mentality came to be, you know. But a modern day culture is still going up the spiral, even if we consider it indigenous and so on. So you're gonna have to know what I'm talking about, like a sense of spiral dynamics. They might be all the way up to like a green, you know, but still transcended and included the tribal essence of the purple. Something that our modern day like American culture hasn't done, that we've dislocated with. So they can developmentally move up. I don't know if you're following me.
I am following and I
Okay.
don't agree. I mean,
That's
I
fine.
think we've all actually have our own tribes, here and everywhere else on the planet. So, anyway, that's going to be a much longer
That's cool.
thing.
Yeah, no, I think we might be
Wilbur has
misidentifying.
his own
Yeah,
tribe.
well, I mean, we might not.
Right? Wilburites, you know?
Hold on. No, but I might, as a human being, putting yourself over at that, you might have a different concept of tribe. Like, I think, because I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
And there'd be more of a resonance if we talked it through in depth.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
Well, you know, I mean, this is very much a hot button with me, and I've, you know, so we're not going to solve this one in the next 2 minutes, clearly, but because I think he's very mistaken in this one aspect of the model. So,
yeah. So the model itself came from the evolution of man, saying that there's a development in paradigms. So when he talks about tribal, even though we're not talking about tribal society, that's what there's just an association with the words. We're talking about a nomadic type of tribal that hasn't even developed into a societal. Those that have societies. We're talking like pre-society tribal. We're talking about something
there
that's
are people in the world who probably fit that description.
no,
But
it's almost
all
died
of
out. So we're talking about so beige. The first step doesn't exist in human culture. The tribal culture, as he says it, like babies go through, but it's not in existence anymore at all. So when he uses the word tribal, he's not talking about the type of cultures that you would visit in modern day anywhere.
Yeah. Well,
So I think, I'm sorry.
no, I mean, well, that's also debatable. I've actually had that conversation with him too, so he does.
I don't agree.
Yeah,
That's-
so anyway, so that's a whole other thing, yeah.
Thanks, I'm hogging more space here. Then we should quit. But I think, you know, where I question Wilbur's model most fundamentally is this notion that we're evolving and yet we're not living sustainably with the planet.
Right.
So the feedback we're getting from the it and the it's or the we, I don't know whoever it is, you know, is that we, the collective, the human collective, is, you know, drastically out of balance with our environment. And to then put the cultures that live sustainably on the planet for 100,000 years,
Right.
make them inferior
Yeah, right,
and make
Right.
us superior,
right. More evolved.
more evolved,
Right.
is a very questionable premise.
Yeah.
There's an arrogance
Thank
in
you.
that.
Thank you,
It is
Karen.
very problematic.
Calling them savages,
Right.
when they were the ones who were spiritually thanking the animals for the food and, you know, being grateful when Native Americans were eating meat. They were acknowledging it as gratitude, as part of the circle of life, which is another conversation.
Yeah, and I wouldn't, and I don't want to speak for Wilbur, right? But to say even us and them is an ethnocentric type of living, right? To say, hey, this is world-centric, but hey, we're having a human experience. You know, that kind of breaks
And
with
I think
distinctions.
that's ultimately where we all, what I agree with very much is that we do absolutely have to evolve to a world-centric perspective, all of us, to survive. Because as long as there is an us and there is a them,
You're in a hurry, I'm hearing this.
then
Check out the
we're all in
website.
trouble. Yeah, so, anyway, so thank you very much.
Can I ask one thing?
Please.
So you're going on to CIS in the fall, I know, to do your doctorate. What are you hoping to do with this going forward? Obviously,
This is
finish
a
your book and-
lifelong. A book is just small. Like this is a lifelong. But I committed to this at 18. Lifelong quest. I'll write books and books and books on this topic and push this as far as I can go. And this is the form it's taking at this moment in my life. So at the end of when I write the dissertation, I'm going to put that into the book. And I have another book in the making also aside from this that I started a couple years ago for you're the class, you know, that's like 50 pages in that I want to continue too. And so there's going to be a lot of, like in any way it can be pushed through the arts, through culture, through anything that this worldview paradigm is going to emerge. It's going to emerge, you know, and it is emerging. It's already in thoughts, you know, it's being embodied in us and so on, and it'll keep pushing in my class.
So if we start an email list with our names, would you send us the poem?
Yeah.
Great, okay, awesome.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Jahan.
Thank you for coming.
Make the conversation stimulating.
That's it.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
an amazing, I mean, you really are taking an amazing view, and from a very, I think, evolved consciousness perspective, and I want to really acknowledge that.
Thank you.
All right, okay. And you are the last. So with your presentation, we are now finished with the final integrated project. So thank you for taking us home.
Thank you.
All right, you got it?
Yeah.